Well, Chaos Rising has been out for a few days now, but the question is, moving forward, how will this impact the meta going into NAIC? And for this video specifically, I want to talk about the two main decks coming out of this set that are realistically the most viable, and that's going to be Mega Greninja and of course Beedrill EX. These are both very powerful decks that have the ability to do a lot of damage, spread damage for Mega Greninja, just kind of straight up damage for Beedrill EX. And I think they're both very interesting. They're very different decks, but I do think that they have a place in the meta. And I think going into NAIC, we will see both of these decks. I do think Mega Greninja will be way more popular than Beedrill, but I do think that Beedrill will have possibly a deep run into maybe top 64. That's my guess. I do think that some top players might decide to pick up the Beedrill. There are some flaws with it, but I'm going to go over all that in this video and kind of give my thoughts on if this is the play or not. So looking at these two decks and looking at the results in Japan, because in Japan they do get the sets earlier. Chaos Rising over there, the equivalent of that, has been out for quite some time now. We did have a recent Champions League over in Japan, so these are big, thousands of players in the tournaments. They're very big events, and kind of gives us a little bit of insight of what we can kind of expect with the meta. I will say with Champions Leagues, they are best of one throughout the entire tournament. So it is a little bit different than best of three, obviously, but it's still kind of a good idea of like what the meta kind of could look like over here. And unfortunately for both of these decks, we didn't see any of them in top 32. And that's honestly not a great sign, but it doesn't mean it's the end of the world. Like I said, I do think Greninja has some more potential than Beedrill. I'll kind of talk about why, but I do think that both of these potentially could make top 64. I do expect a Greninja to make at least top 32 at NAIC, just kind of given my thoughts of playing the decks a little bit, kind of, looking at them online and stuff like that. I do think the potential is there for both of these decks. So let's talk about if it's the play for NAIC or really any Chaos Rising tournament moving forward. Obviously right now, Chaos Rising is not legal for tournament play. It's going to take another basically 2 weeks until it is. So pretty much that week leading into NAIC, that's when it would be legal. Let's talk about these decks specifically in the meta though. So first up, we have Beedrill EX. This is a fun deck. I started playing it a little bit on live. I honestly had a lot of fun with this deck. Like I really was excited for it when it was first revealed, and then I kind of just like forgot about it a little bit, and then I was like, let me give it a shot, and I did have a lot of fun with it. But there are definitely some good pros with the deck, and I'll also talk about the cons as well. So obviously the pros: it hits very hard for 1 energy. You'll see the attack there, Rumbling Bees, 110 for each Beedrill in play. So essentially you could hit up to 440. Realistically, most games your goal is to hit for 330. That's going to knock out most things in the formats, and realistically you are going to prize some pieces of the Beedrill, hopefully not more than just one. The other benefit of this deck is it does set up very quickly, so kind of similar to Hydrapple, similar to Arboliva. You do have the Force of Vitality, so basically if you go first, you can kind of set up your board a little bit, and then by turn 2 you can start evolving all the way up with that Stadium card. Another benefit obviously is that it beats grass weak decks. So we're talking about Garchomp, we're talking about Zoroark. You hit into all those decks for weakness. So very, very favorable matchups there. Even stuff like Mega Absol, obviously you can hit that for weakness as well. So it's always good to have like a good typing offensively into some other good decks that like have that weakness. So it's very good into those types of decks that are also pretty good in the meta right now. Their main weaknesses are grass. So this is just another grass weakness that they have to kind of worry about. And the other benefit to this deck is that it is a pretty simple game plan. You evolve straight up, you hit hard. There's not much else to it. Your goal is just to set up fast and start taking knockouts. So pretty simple game plan, very easy to pick up, I would say, and definitely a deck that you can kind of pick up between now and NAIC if you want to play it. As far as the cons here, we do have a couple of them. Realistically, I've kind of been saying this all weekend. I was streaming a little bit, and I said with this kind of deck, you're going to lose most games to yourself. Like, it's not a deck that you lose to a lot of other decks. It's like you lose to yourself more often than not, and that's because of the bad pricing issues. And that's the real reason why I don't think this is like a true top tier contender, because for you to do more damage, you have to have more Beedrill in play. And if you prize a Weedle, or you prize Kakuna, or a Beedrill, or, 2 of one of those things, it basically limits your ability to get set up and do that maximum damage output. So a lot of times, realistically, we're talking about 12 cards total you need to set up 4 Beedrills. There's a good chance you're going to prize at least 1 to 2 of those pieces, and you just have to kind of hope it's not 2 Weedles or 2 Beedrills or 2 Kakunas. Like, you would rather it be like, 1 Kakuna and 1 Beedrill, because then you can still set up 3 Beedrill lines, but you obviously have no control over that. As far as another struggle with this deck, you do struggle into some single prizers. With decks like this, you are just taking knockouts essentially, and going into stuff like Alakazam where they can just one-shot you back. You just kind of lose that prize trade more often than not, unless you have ways to beat it. The other bad thing about this deck is obviously going to be the Watchtower and Disruption. So pretty much all the Beedrill lists I've seen are using that Dunsparce engine. So again, you know, things like Watchtower, Unfair Stamp can really kind of hurt you if you're not fully set up. So it's one of those things that a lot of these Dunsparce engine decks kind of have a weakness to, but obviously you can kind of play around it. You do play like 4 stadiums, so it's not something to be like too scared of. But if you are going to get Watchtower and disrupted early on, you know, let's say you set up a Beedrill right away, you knock out a Badoo, you only have like 1 Beedrill in play, that's where that can kind of hurt you. So you do have to kind of be, you know, cautious about that as well, and kind of figure out when you can take your knockouts, when your board is established and all that kind of stuff. Let's talk about the lists here. There are kind of 2 versions of Beedrill that I have seen so far in Japan and online, and I'll kind of explain what my thoughts are on each of these. So the first one here is Beedrill with Arboliva. This is the deck I've been playing, honestly, the list. I've really enjoyed it a lot. I think Arboliva fixes a lot of problems that Beedrill has. So obviously it is another, you know, stage 2 Pokemon that you have to set up, so it can be kind of hard to set it up, but I think Arboliva is really good for a couple of reasons. Reason number 1, it kind of gives you a win con into some of these single prize decks. You're able to kind of spread damage, take multiple knockouts, and kind of offset that prize trade a little bit better. So I do like that ability to be able to kind of give yourself a chance in those matchups a little bit more. But the other thing that I think is strong about Arboliva is that you can kind of start off with the Arboliva as far as taking knockouts goes, and you can kind of collect those Beedrill pieces that you prize. So I think a big benefit to it is you can start setting up your Beedrills behind the Arboliva, and you can use that Arboliva to take an early 1 or 2 prizes, and a lot of times you'll kind of find those pieces that were missing into that Beedrill line. So it's kind of a good thing that you can take knockouts with Arboliva, you can set up the Beedrills behind Arboliva, and then it kind of forces your opponent to either knock out the Arboliva first, or have to like waste resources like Boss to knock out your Beedrills on the bench. A lot of Pokemon can't really one-shot Beedrill, so you kind of give yourself some time there, but I think it's really good for just kind of getting you those early prizes and kind of minimizing the chance of you prizing pieces that you need. That way, if you do take those knockouts, you can kind of collect them early on and set up those Beedrills for when that Arboliva gets knocked out. So that's why I really like that inclusion of Arboliva, but again, it does make it a little bit more bricky. The other version of Beedrill is, again, the Dunsparce engine, but unlike the first version here, it's just like a thicker line of Dunsparce. Your goal is to just to burn through the deck and essentially set up Beedrill as fast as possible. The downside of this version is that you are going all in on the Beedrill here, so if you prize Beedrill pieces, you're kind of just stuck, you know what I mean? You can play exchange ticket, but you have to kind of dig for it at times. But that's the reason why I don't like this build as much, because you're really kind of putting the full faith into, hey, like, I'm not gonna prize my Beedrill pieces, you know what I mean? At least with the Arboliva version, if you prize Beedrill pieces, Arboliva is still a very strong attacker into a lot of Pokemon in the format. You can still take multiple prize cards with it. You can kind of give yourself a chance. With this version, you're kind of just stuck a lot of times. You do play the Dunsparce EX to kind of give yourself a chance in certain matchups, but again, it can be kind of a weakness to this version of the deck. But with this one, I'd say it's more consistent. You're able to burn through the deck more consistently. You can set up faster, but the downside is you're going all in on the Beedrill. If you prize something, you just might lose. So overall, I would say Beedrill EX is a B tier play, no pun intended. I think it's a B tier play right now going into NAIC. It's a strong deck. I do think it has the prizing issues, and when you talk about a tournament that's 9, 10, you know, 14 rounds, whatever it is, 15 rounds potentially this year, you're talking about a deck like that. More often than not, you're going to find yourself having those prizing issues at some points throughout the day. The chances of you not having those issues are very slim, I would say. And even within a best of 3 setting, there's a good chance that in a couple of those rounds, you might find yourself 2 out of the 3 games really having some bad pricing issues. So I think for a long tournament like that, it's kind of a B tier play. If you can get going, if your luck is on your side, you don't prize all your pieces, you're going to be in a great spot. But more often than not, you might find yourself having those prizing issues. But let's go ahead and talk about Mega Greninja here, a deck that a lot of people are very excited for, including myself. I've been playing this as well on ladder a lot. I've been enjoying it. I kind of stopped playing it the last day or 2, but I have been enjoying the deck, and I have ordered all my stuff for Mega Greninja to go ahead and build it. There are a lot of pros to this deck and a couple of cons, I would say. I do think that this is a better deck than Beedrill EX right now. I would say the first pro is that you have that potential for big spread damage. So obviously with Mega Greninja, you can hit for 200 damage, and you have the ability to spread 6 damage counters onto a Pokemon on your opponent's side, whether that be the active or the bench. Usually 200 plus 60 will knock out most Pokemon in the format. And if it doesn't, you can put that 60 somewhere else and take those knockouts later on. So it's really good for that. You also have that ability to capitalize on no Shaman with the fighting Greninja that is played in this deck. So a lot of decks right now are cutting Shaman, especially Dragapult. So you have that ability to use Mirage Barrage and take big knockouts on Pokemon. You can really swing games like that early on. It's pretty easy to set up if you're not getting item locked, and you can just kind of start taking that prize race early on. And again, you can kind of combine that with Mega Greninja's ability as well. So you could do like 120 plus 60 on top of that. You have that ability to just kind of take those big knockouts on the bench. There's also a lot of fighting weak Pokemon in the format right now. Vezdipity EX, Meowth EX, Kangaskhan. So a lot of Pokemon that are weak to fighting that you could really take big knockouts on early on. And a lot of times you can even like boss something up like a Vezdipity or Meowth. You can go for Mirage Barrage. You hit for weakness in the active, so you knock it out, and you can still put 120 on the bench somewhere else. So a lot of these decks are playing those Pokemon. A lot of times with the lack of jaw support, you're kind of forced to put down a Meowth to really find what you need to play the game. So you can really take advantage of that and take those early knockouts. And of course, going into an event like this where the format is fresh and there are no really big major tournaments prior to it, you can capitalize on that lack of experience versus Greninja. It's going to be a deck that people are obviously going to kind of test for, but I would say at the kind of lower medium levels, people are not going to be as prepared for this deck. Obviously at the top levels, everyone's going to be prepared for everything, but I think going, you know, through those early rounds of the tournament, you can really kind of capitalize on that lack of knowledge versus this deck. And this is a deck that is pretty high skill, I would say. So if you're able to master it, you can really take advantage of that. So some of the cons with this deck are that it is kind of a higher skill ceiling deck. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but what I mean by that is that it's kind of a short turnaround time. So if you haven't been playing Mega Greninja, you don't feel comfortable with it, you don't know all the matchups and all that kind of stuff, like you've got a couple of weeks to learn it, and the question is, are you really playing it at the highest level at that point? Probably not. So this is a deck that I think over time will get a lot better as people kind of play this deck more, learn the deck more, learn the matchups, all that kind of stuff. So I think right now it's just kind of a quick turnaround time. So if you're just now thinking of picking up Mega Greninja, it might not be the best play because, again, you kind of do need that experience, I feel like. It's also got a pretty even matchup in the pool from what I've seen. It's not a deck that just kind of beats Dragapults. And so the question is like, would I just play Dragapult over this, you know what I mean? And I do think that Dragapult is kind of a better deck overall, so I think it kind of plays similarly to Dragapult. There are obviously some different things you can do with this deck, but I think when you're comparing it 1-to-1, I think Dragapult is a better deck, and I think that Dragapult matchup for Greninja is not inherently favored, so it's kind of a problem when you're going into all these different Dragapults throughout the day, you know what I mean? If you're not necessarily beating it, but you're just kind of having an even matchup, it means a lot of times you're just gonna have to kind of outskill them. And again, that kind of goes to that first point of how practiced are you with the deck, how much experience do you have, all that kind of stuff. Another downside is the item lock. It does kind of struggle a little bit with item lock. Frogadier is very nice because you can use that to find Pokemon that you need, but it can still be a struggle with item lock if you're not able to find those pieces early on and evolve into the Frogadier. So that is kind of one big struggle with the deck, and I think that's why the pull matchup is kind of 50-50 because Budew kind of really hurts it. And then the other downside is that it is a 3-prizer, so going up against stuff like Raging Bolt can be kind of difficult when they're just able to one-shot you. So kind of a downside with the deck, but obviously there's a lot of 3-prizers out there, so that's not necessarily a terrible thing, but it is just kind of annoying. What I do like about Greninja though is that you can kind of lean on that fighting Greninja, so in those types of matchups you don't necessarily need to use Mega Greninja as much. You can kind of save it for the end game. So I will say that you can kind of play around that last point there, which is kind of nice compared to some other 3-prizer decks. So let's talk about the different builds here. So first build here is the Dunsparce version. This is kind of the more popular version from what I'm seeing. A lot of people are saying that they enjoy this deck a lot more than the Dragapult version of the deck. I'll kind of give my thoughts here on this. I think that the Dunsparce engine is a lot more consistent than the Dragapult engine of the deck. I think that you're able to kind of find what you need a little bit easier. You can play it with Grand Tree or Neo Upper Energy. I've seen both builds of it. You have the ability to pivot pretty easily with the Dunsparce, so I think this is the more consistent version. But I think the Dracloak version kind of opens up the potential for more different plays because you can use Dragapult as an attacker. Let me go ahead and show you guys the list here. You can use Dragapult as an attacker with that Neo Upper Energy. So it kind of sets up more plays for you for that end game where you can spread damage very strategically with your Mega Greninja. That way you can close out games with Dragapults. So that's something that I really like. I think that this version opens up the ability for more different plays. just for different lines of winning the game, but I do think that the Dunsparce version is a little bit more consistent. You're able to draw cards more consistently. You can open up that bench space by getting rid of the Dunsparce whenever you don't need them. So that's something that I really like about the Dunsparce version. And with the Dragapult version, I think that it really opens up more plays that you can kind of just open yourself up to like win the game, or, you know. For me personally, I've been enjoying the Dragapult version, not gonna lie, but I will say I feel like I play the game more and have a better chance at winning sometimes with the Dunsparce engine. It just feels more consistent to me. So overall, I would say that this is an A tier play going into NAIC. I think that this is a very strong deck, and if you feel confident with this deck, you know your matchups, all that kind of stuff, I'd say go ahead and lock it in. If you're not comfortable with the deck yet, you don't feel confident in the matchups, I would say just avoid playing it for right now. I'd say, like, you still play it, obviously, like learn the deck, but I would save it for another event. I just think that, again, it's a short turnaround time. This is a higher skill ceiling deck, I would say, that you really need time to kind of master. So it's definitely understandable if it feels like you're losing games because you're making the wrong plays or the mistakes or whatever, because you just haven't done the practice yet. But I do expect that we're going to see a lot of top players on this, and I do expect to see at least 1 or 2 in top 32, honestly. But those are my thoughts on the meta kind of going into NAIC with these 2 brand new decks. Let me know what you guys think the play is for NAIC. Me personally, I'm kind of in between 3 decks right now. Dragapult, some variant of Dragapult. Hydrapple is a deck that I've really been enjoying. And then also possibly Greninja. Greninja is kind of like my 3rd option right now. I don't think I'm going to play Greninja, but I might, who knows. But we're going to have to wait and see what it is that I lock in. I've been doing a lot of testing. I've been doing some more live streams and stuff like that. So been really kind of enjoying this format and just kind of how fresh it feels right now. But yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comments below about these 2 new decks, if you're enjoying the format and what your play is for NAIC. Hope you guys enjoy this one, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one.